Hello and welcome to my school channel. My name is Angela, and in this video we're going to continue the government topic by topic video lesson. So we're moving on to a new topic: franchise, elections and the electoral system. So in this topic we're going to discuss the citizens' right to vote and be voted for, and how these rights are respected and valued in a democratic society. So I've divided this video lesson into 3 parts. So we're going to begin with the first part, where we'll discuss franchise and some concepts under elections. So please stay with us, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back to my school channel. Like I said earlier, we are moving on to a new topic: franchise, elections and the electoral system. So let's dive right into it. Alright, so here are a list of things that we're going to be discussing in this video lesson. We're going to discuss the concept of franchise, the types of franchise and the conditions necessary for eligibility. Then we'll move on to election. We'll define election, discuss the functions and the merits, types of election, free and fair election, the electoral commission, and then we'll move on to the electoral system, where we discuss the definition, the concept of constitutional delimitation, types of elections, and so many other concepts. So let's begin with the concept of franchise. All right. So franchise refers to the political rights of qualified adult citizens within a country to vote and be voted for in an election. So in the previous video lesson, we discussed the concept of citizenship, and we talked about how the right to vote and be voted for is restricted to citizens of a particular country. But now we're going to discuss how this right is not restricted to just only citizens, but qualified adult citizens within a particular country. So individuals who are qualified to vote are called electorates, while those who are to be voted for are called candidates. Now let's move on to the next slide. All right, there are 2 main types of franchise. We have the limited or restricted franchise and the unlimited or universal adult suffrage. Let's begin with the limited or restricted franchise. All right, so the limited or restricted franchise refers to a system in which voting rights are granted only to a specific group of people who meet certain criteria. So these criteria can be based on factors such as sex. Okay, so in some countries, only male citizens are allowed to vote or contest in elections. So this is no longer practiced in our modern times, but historically, voting was restricted to white male property owners. However, this changed after organized protests by suffrage movements in various parts of the world. So it was not until the 20th century before women were allowed to vote in an election. So this type of system has a limited or restricted franchise. So another criteria can be race or color. So race or color can determine the right to vote. E.g. in South Africa during the apartheid regime, only the whites had the right to vote and be voted for. So the blacks did not have franchise, they did not have that right. Then another criteria is residential qualification. So the number of months or years a person has lived in a particular area can also determine the right to vote. So this happened in the American society and in British society before the 20th century. Only property owners, people who own property and who pay their taxes and who had a residential location, were allowed to vote at that time. So other criteria includes educational qualification, religion, or military service. Whether or not you've actually served in the military, if you've not given your service to the military, you may not be allowed to vote in that country. Now let's move on to the next slide. All right, what are the merits of limited or restricted franchise? One of the merits is that it promotes informed voting. So by restricting the franchise to those who meet certain qualifications, it is argued that the electorate is more informed and capable of making rational decisions, and this can potentially lead to more stable and effective governance. So unlike in an unlimited franchise, like we're going to discuss later on, in this particular system, the people that are allowed to vote are adult citizens who are well educated and who have a good background, who are familiar with the political situation going on in their country. And so it is restricted to these people within that society. So some people argue that it helps to make for more informed voting decisions. And that merit is that it reduces populism. So limiting the electorate can reduce the influence of populist leaders who might exploit the emotions or ignorance of a larger, less informed electorate. So in an unlimited franchise, so many of the voters might be illiterate, they might be ignorant of the various political issues going on in the society. And so populist leaders who try to exploit the emotions of a large group of people, of the majority, in order for them to gain power, they might take advantage of this situation. So this is why some of the proponents of this particular system claim it is a better solution for a democratic society. And that merit is that it makes use of qualified candidates. So the few that are contesting an election in this system are more qualified than those contesting in a universal adult suffrage. For a country that is practicing unlimited franchise or universal adult suffrage, anybody can contest an election. And some of these people who are contesting in the election may not be qualified to hold such position. So this is another merit of limited franchise. Now let's move on to the demerits. All right. One of the demerits of limited franchise is disenfranchisement. So this system inherently discriminates against certain groups, such as the poor, women, blacks, and other communities from participating in the political process. So the basic right to vote and voted for, that is given to citizens of a particular country, would not be given to certain members of the society. So this is a demerit of limited franchise. And that demerit is that it is undemocratic. By restricting voting rights, it contradicts the fundamental democratic principle of equality, where every individual should have an equal say in governance. So it is undemocratic. It should not be practiced in a democratic society, because in a democratic society, power should rest in the hands of the people. But when you take away this power to vote and be voted for, the people can't make decisions in that society, and so it is undemocratic. And that demerit is that there is a potential for elite control. So it can lead to a concentration of power among a small elites who may govern in their own interest rather than in the interest of the broader population. Again, when you take away the rights of the citizens to make decisions in that society, the power rests in the hands of a few people, those elites who are allowed to vote in that society. So there is a potential for control, for the abuse of power by these elites in the society. Now let's move on to the next slide. All right, so I'm moving on to unlimited or universal adult suffrage. Unlimited or universal adult suffrage refers to a system in which all adult citizens are granted the right to vote, regardless of their gender, race, economic status, education, or other characteristics. So the right to vote and be voted for is granted to all adult citizens within that society. Now let's move on to the next slide. All right, this type of franchise is the most common in modern democracies, and is based on the principle that every adult citizen should have an equal say in the governance of their country. That is what democracy is all about. Everybody should have a say in the governance of the country. So though all adults, male or female, have the right to vote and be voted for, there are still qualifications that need to be met by individuals before voting. However, these qualifications are not as restrictive as those of limited or restricted franchise. So we still have some criteria that adult citizens need to follow before they can vote or contest in an election, but it is not as restrictive as that of limited franchise. Now let's move on to the next slide. All right, so we're going to look at some of these criteria, some of these qualifications that are required of people who want to vote in that system. So one of the criteria or one of the qualifications is age. So in Nigeria, Britain, and USA, for example, only citizens that are 18 years and above are allowed to vote. In Germany, the statutory age is 20 years, while in India it is 21 years. So if you are below this age limit in that country, you are not allowed to vote. Another criteria is citizenship. You are required to be a citizen in order to be qualified to vote or be voted for. We've talked about that in our previous video lesson. It is a right that is restricted to just citizens of a particular country. Registration is another qualification. Citizens who are of statutory age are required to register and get their voter's card before they are allowed to vote. You have to register before the election day in order for you to be able to participate in the election. Sanity is also another qualification. A voter must be sane and in possession of his mental faculties before he can be allowed to vote. It is stipulated in our constitution. Bankruptcy is another qualification. You should not be bankrupt, or you should not be declared bankrupt, because someone who has been declared bankrupt cannot vote and cannot be voted for. Criminal history is another criteria. So criminals or those with a criminal record may be disqualified from voting in some political systems. Now let's move on to the next slide. All right, what are the merits of unlimited or universal adult suffrage? One of them is equality. It promotes equality. Universal suffrage ensures that all citizens, regardless of their background, have an equal opportunity to participate in the political process. So it helps to ensure that everybody has equal power in that system. That's what democracy is all about. Everybody has equal power to make decisions within that society. It also encourages participation. So by including everyone, universal suffrage encourages broader participation in the political process. Qualified citizens are provided the opportunity to exercise their political rights in that system. So it helps to ensure that everybody is participating in the decision-making process in that country. It also encourages legitimacy because the government elected through universal suffrage are seen as more legitimate because they represent the will of the entire population, not just a select group. So when everybody accepts this person who has been voted for as a leader, that leader is legitimate. He has gotten acceptance from the people he is governing. Now let's move on to the next slide. Okay, now we're going to discuss the demerits. One of the demerits is potential for uninformed voting. So universal suffrage allows everyone to vote regardless of their knowledge or understanding of political issues. So this can lead to decisions that are based on misinformation or superficial factors rather than informed judgments. So some of these people may not be knowledgeable about the issues going on in the society and they are given the right to vote. So when they come out to vote, they may be swayed by populist leaders we're going to discuss later on, or so many other factors that prevent them from voting the leaders who actually deserve the position, who actually have the knowledge to move the country forward. And that demerit is the risk of populism. So universal suffrage can increase the risk of populism where leaders appeal to the emotions and prejudices of the masses rather than focusing on sound policies. So when you have a leader who, instead of talking about the policies that he's going to implement when he gets to power, is appealing to the emotions of the citizens, it's a problem because the citizens may not be able to make informed decisions. They may not elect those leaders who can actually do something to effect a change in the society. So this can be a risk for unlimited or universal adult suffrage. And that demerit is complexity in governance. So managing the demands and interests of a diverse population can be challenging and can lead to political instability and difficulty in achieving consensus. So when you have a particular group of people who are diverse race, diverse ethnic groups, diverse gender and things like that, you have to pay attention to the interests of diverse members of the society in order for you to be doing your job properly. So this can lead to complexity in governance in that society. Now let's move on to the next slide. All right, there are different types of suffrage. We have adult suffrage. Adult suffrage, also known as universal suffrage, grants the right to vote to all adult citizens, whether male or female. And this type of suffrage exists in most democratic nations of the world, including Nigeria, the United States of America, UK, Canada, India, South Africa, and the likes. Then we have male suffrage. So this suffrage restricts voting rights to male citizens only. So historically, many societies only allowed men to vote, and this was the case in the United Kingdom before 1918 and in Saudi Arabia before 2015. So this is a much more recent historical fact about male suffrage in our society. Then we have taxpayer suffrage. Taxpayer suffrage restricts voting rights to individuals who pay taxes or meet certain financial criteria. So in the early 1800s in the US, several states had property and tax-paying qualifications for voting. So one of the reasons why they allowed this suffrage to exist is to ensure that blacks were not allowed to vote because they do not have the resources to pay tax or to meet certain financial criteria. So they're trying to restrict the voting rights to the whites in the American society. Then we have property suffrage. Property suffrage restricts voting rights to individuals who own property or meet certain property-related criteria. Again, suffrage is practiced both in the UK and in the US, but in the US, again, it was practiced in order to restrict those people who do not have properties in the United States of America. In other words, the blacks during that era. So the UK and the US were initially tied to property ownership in the early 1800s, but things have changed now. In the United States of America and the United Kingdom, they practice adult suffrage. All adults, male and female citizens, are allowed to vote in that society. Now let's move on to the next slide. All right, so we're going to discuss the conditions necessary for eligibility as candidates of election. In order for you to contest for an office in an election, you have to meet certain criteria. One of the criteria is age. Candidates must meet a minimum age requirement to stand for election, and this requirement ensures that citizens have sufficient life experience and maturity to hold office. Here in Nigeria, the 1999 Constitution outlines the minimum age requirements for various public offices. So in order for you to run for president, you must be at least 40 years old, and it says so in section 131B of the Nigerian Constitution. You have to be 35 years of age in order to contest for governorship position. You have to be 35 to contest for Senate, and you have to be 30 years old to contest for the House of Representatives. Now let's move on to the next slide. Okay, and that criteria is educational qualification. Some countries require candidates to have a certain level of educational attainment to ensure they have the necessary knowledge and skills for the role. Again, some of these positions, they're based on merit. You have to have some experience, some skills, some knowledge in order for you to be able to hold such office. So here in Nigeria, the 1999 Constitution outlines that in order to qualify for the office of the president, governor, or member of the Senate or House of Representatives, you must have been educated up to at least senior school certificate level. So you can see that in various parts of the Nigerian Constitution. So we've come to the end of the first segment of this video lesson. If you would like to continue on this journey with us, please go down to the link in the description below. Click on it. It will take you to my school website where you can subscribe for the government topic by topic video lesson. There you can continue on this journey with us. We are going to move on to more conditions necessary for eligibility as candidates of election. We are going to discuss some conditions such as residential qualification, citizenship, tax payments, and the likes. And then we're going to move on to elections. We're going to discuss direct and indirect election. So I hope to see you there. I believe you're enjoying this content. If yes, please do not forget to hit the like button, click on the subscribe button, and lastly tap on the notification bell to get informed as soon as we release the next videos.